Welcome, everyone, to the Leading Together podcast, Insights for Delaware's Tomorrow. In each episode, we sit down with the top minds and leaders from across the nation, and they generously share their perspectives to help advance FSE's mission, which is to build capacity, raise awareness, and really elevate the role of school board leadership across our communities. I'm your host, Julia Kelleher, Executive Director of First Aid Educate. Thanks for joining us. Today, I am honored to be joined by Dr. Kymyona Burk. She is a nationally recognized education leader, literacy expert, and known for the groundbreaking work that you've all heard about, the Mississippi Miracle, but what she did in Mississippi with her Literacy-Based Promotion Act that really helped spark change that everyone is looking at. In addition to being that, she's a warm, kind, caring, committed educator. She's currently serving as a senior policy fellow at the Foundation for Excellence in Education, and she's a visiting scholar fellow at the Science for Reading at SUNY New Paltz. Over 25 years of experience, teacher, coach, district leader, state literacy director. Dr. Burk has really helped shape reading practice, in Mississippi, but across the country. And so we're here today. I'm thrilled to have you here. Thank you so much for being here, Kymyona.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Us too. So let's start from the beginning. You've worked in all these levels in education. I ran through in a little bit of the intro. It's very rare to have someone who's, been there from the front door all the way to the highest levels. So could we share a little bit with the audience about your path?
Sure. And actually, I just kind of call it divine. I was not interested in education in the beginning. My father was a teacher. One of my aunts was a dean of student affairs at a university. And I just kind of said to myself that I'm not going into education. And I took a year off before law school. And, one of my aunt's friends said, well, maybe just substitute teach this year, before you get into law school. On my first day of substitute teaching, I was offered a job.
Oh, wow.
I was offered a job to teach. They had just begun the Success for All program. And I'm sure many of you have heard of it from Soul to Story. But I was hired to teach this program to first grade students. And my life changed. I mean, it was seeing the light bulb go off. Like you literally see the light bulb go off when children are learning. And I just fell in love with it all. I fell in love with the colleagues, the teachers lounge, all the things about it. So that's how I got to education. And it has just been, the most rewarding thing in my life as far as service and giving back. Yeah.
So that first class, your first teaching experience turned into your first job. But then you went on to do something called repeater class. You were assigned to repeater classes. Could you tell what are repeater classes?
No, after that, I became certified to teach. I became certified to teach English because I'm considered an alternate route teacher. I didn't go to traditional educator preparation programs. And so my first 3 years of teaching, I taught advanced students. And then my fourth year of teaching, my principal said, well, I have, some advanced classes for you, but I also have a class of repeaters. So this was at the high school. And I was like, what do you mean? And so these are students who, at the time were 16 and 17 years old, but were classified as ninth graders. So they had either failed somewhere along the line in probably 2 or more grades. And I had one class of repeaters. They were mostly males. There were about 11 males and 2 females. They were all African-American. And it challenged me so much as a teacher because I was just so used to children who showed up and were ready to learn all of this. And these students were not motivated. And they were there because we have a compulsory school attendance law, right? And so I just really had to figure out how to reach these students.
And how did you do that?
Well, I think a part of my background that contributes to this story is that I grew up in a very low income area, and the school where I was teaching was a school that I also attended for high school.
Oh, wow. Really? That's so remarkable. Yeah.
And so, even coming from that community, the one thing that I never wanted to do was to make excuses for students, right? Because again, I'm a product of this community. I'm proof that, you can go on and do great things. And I think that a part of it was being there, motivating them, and also saying, like, you're going to do this. Like, I'm not going to because you don't want to be here. And establishing that we were going to get through this together. But I'll admit, and I think we'll get into it, I'll admit that I did not know what to do with adolescent students who were struggling to read.
Right.
I'm teaching English. You know what I'm saying? You need a class to graduate. I could say all of those things, but the core issue was that they could not access the content. And somewhere along the way, several people missed that. And I don't think they missed it on purpose. It was just when you get past elementary school, there's really not a lot of supports for struggling adolescent learners. I really dig deeply and go back to school to learn how to address those deficiencies.
So that kind of brings us to this logical conclusion that literacy sort of is the foundation of everything. That everything else and it makes sense. I mean, it seems obvious, but I'm not sure that it's kind of that awareness or understanding has shaped practice, because I think we're still passing students on that don't have the literacy skills to be able to engage. So what do you think? I mean, what's the hardest thing for a content area teacher who maybe doesn't know wants to teach the content, right? Like, I want to teach, you know what I mean? Like,
I want to teach biology,
Right.
I think that even in K-12 education, there's always conversations about these silos that occur between K-12 and also higher ed. But I think there are also silos within the K-12 education space, like elementary schools sit in their silo, or middle schools, high schools. And I think that there has to be an opportunity for our secondary teachers to also be aware of these deficiencies. I mean, I had just not been aware that I would have students who were showing up who had foundational skills deficit. And then a part of that was, once I found out, then it was also, what do I do about it? So I think at that level, again, as you begin to move up in the grades, the external supports or even supports within the school begin to disappear. In elementary school, you have tutors that are volunteering, you have interventionists, right? You have coaches, you have all of these people who are in this space helping to teach children how to read. When you get to middle school, many of those supports are absent. You don't see interventionists really. You really don't see literacy coaches. You don't see all of those things. So not only do teachers not have the help to learn how to give students what they need, there may not also be other structures in place, like universal screening. Why do we stop that, right? After kids leave third grade or fourth grade, we still need to establish a baseline. So the data collection is a bit different. They work towards end of state tests instead of monitoring along the way. So there may be infrastructure things, there may be teacher knowledge, there may also be other things around scheduling to allow for interventions to take place. So I think that some of those practices that we have in elementary school, especially around structure and building capacity, that we need to expand and extend those practices beyond that.
Makes a lot of sense. And then when we think about the teacher pipeline too, I mean, are there things you think we should change about the preparation programs for teachers?
Yeah, so across the country now, we have, I think, over 30 states that have laws that have included educator preparation programs in their Read by 3 laws. So they are strongly encouraging, I'll say. Some are requiring, others are strongly encouraging ed prep programs to begin to align to the science of reading. The evidence that shows how students best learn to read. So you have this preparation program alignment in its really kind of infancy stages. But I think where the rubber meets the road is ensuring that once candidates go into their student teaching, because that's where they learn how it's done, and they're paired with teachers, that there's an intentionality in that pairing, right? That the candidates are actually paired with teachers who are instructing using best practices, and not that they're just, sent to a school where they may or may not be, practicing this evidence-based instruction.
I think that's a great point in terms of the practicum experience, or as a emerging teacher is going through a teacher prep program, that their placement provides really that safe space to learn these practices so that when they get out and they have their own set of responsibilities, they're prepared to do it.
Yeah.
That said, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, how coaching and professional development can help teachers that are there, that, this is what we're talking about doing now, but really how many of the teachers that are in the classroom now have had that support they need, and why is coaching and professional development important for those who are in the field now to cultivate that skill?
Yeah, so you have your pre-service and then you have your in-service. And
Uh-huh.
so, I think that there's a both and approach. I think we need
Uh-huh.
to address those who are in the pipeline, and we also need to support those who are currently standing in front of children every day. I will liken it to it's football season, right? So I'll liken it to like all of these football players, especially the NFL, who are making millions and millions of dollars. But guess what they have? They have a coach. They have a quarterback's coach. They have an offensive line coach. They have all of these different coaches to continue to help them, right, get better at their craft. That's no different than education, except for the millions of dollars, right, that they're making. And so the professional development, especially for us in Mississippi, we knew that with all of the different teacher preparation programs, and remember, we passed our law in 2013. So we knew that our candidates were exiting programs being trained in all kinds of ways, right? Being trained in balanced literacy, whole language, science of reading. So we really took an approach where we started off like we were a blank slate, with the right information. And then once you have the theory, our coaches are able to support teachers in translating that theory into practice. We've gone to professional development for years. Like you mentioned, I've been over 25 years. I remember going to PD, getting that binder, coming back to my classroom, putting it on the shelf. No one asked me what I learned. No one asked me to show them, or they expect to see what I learned in practice. So coaches help to ensure that what you learn in PD is going to actually show up in your classroom. And then they help you get there in a non-evaluative manner. So coaching is extremely important. It helps teachers with building those relationships, asking those hard questions, and having a resource, because we know a lot of our school leaders have a lot of different responsibilities. So the coach is there to really kind of help them do that in a way that's non-threatening and non-evaluative.
Yeah, no, so great. And it's such a thank you again for being here. I mean, you have such a wealth of expertise and insight and experience. And you've seen it in a bunch of different places.
Yeah.
The work in Mississippi is truly impressive. The one thing I just want to touch on it, because you mentioned it, and for the audience, if you haven't read the story of what happened in Mississippi, I mean, they moved from one of the bottom three or something like that. I don't wanna, right. So, it wasn't great. And then they passed this law in 2013, and, and where they are today, it just shows the remarkable effects when there's a concerted effort. But the thing, Kymyona, that you mentioned was about the variation and the variability in the teacher prep programs, and aligning that was probably no small feat, because everyone was going through their program like, I just came out. What do you mean? This is how you're supposed to do it. I just spent 4 years. They just told me. And bringing that all together couldn't have been easy.
To that point, when you think about the financial commitment from both, the families, the candidate, whether it's financial aid, student loans, whether parents have saved up to send them to college. But then on the other end, you think about now this financial commitment to the state to say, yeah, we know you've had 4 years, but now we need to retrain you all over again, right? We need to put money into that. So, the goal is ultimately, in my mind, in a very perfect world, that this investment that's being made in these undergraduate educator preparation programs will yield better prepared teachers to show up on day one. And a lot of the funding that's going towards just this initial professional development can go more towards coaching or continuous professional development, right, to strengthen their practice. So hopefully that's where we'll to in some years. But yeah, that's been the topic of conversation. We're spending money here, we're spending money there. How do we make it more efficient?
Right. And that brings me to, and you alluded to it, you mentioned it when you said that you went back to teach at the school where you attended, and this belief, that we have to operate from a paradigm of strengths. This isn't a deficit model where, everybody can, they just might not have had equal chance to show that they can. But really for you, right, I've heard that you speak of this issue of literacy as a social justice issue.
Yes.
So let's unpack that. Why is literacy a social justice issue and not just an education issue?
Right. I think, listen, when we talk about the achievement gap exists because of the gap between white students and Black students. And of course, we know that there are other gaps as it relates to, income, as it relates to disability and all of those things. But the achievement gap truly exists because there's always been this large gap between how white students perform and how Black students perform. And I'll say this, I haven't said it in many places, but I've had some conversations recently that it really just kind of dawned on me. And, you talked about Mississippi being, next to last, we were 49th. And as of 2024, we're now 9th in the nation, with our low income and Hispanic students ranking first when compared to their peers, and our Black students ranking third. But the thing is, Mississippi is still poor.
Mm-hmm.
Income level has not changed. But what has changed? What has changed is the approach and the intentionality in which we have begun to address these issues. We put coaches in our lowest performing schools. We empower teachers with the knowledge that they needed. We begin to identify students early and provide them with those supports, and teachers were equipped to be able to do that. And so also when you think about, oh my gosh, compounded with that is dialect.
Mm-hmm.
This dialect is all of those things that a student comes to class with, our minority students or Black students come to class with as a part of the culture, as a part of who they are, that in some cases are seen as a deficit. Instead of, this is a part of who you are, but for school, right, you're going to learn standard English. So even allowing teachers to understand that when you're screening students and they leave off the
ending syllables,
right, or their subjects and verbs do not agree because that's how they grew up, right? They've never heard that. They didn't conjugate the verb to be, like all of those things, and not saying to a student that that's wrong, that's not how you, understanding and embracing that that's a part of the culture, but also understanding that we have to ensure that students understand standard English and how that works in a school setting, the code switching, all of those things. And so I think that even just in awareness of some of the background and the knowledge and the experiences that students bring to a classroom, and empowering teachers to be able to address those things in a way that supports acknowledgement, but then also gets down to the business of teaching, right? Gets down to the business of teaching children how to read. That's one thing that our coaches were able to do with teachers without them feeling so frustrated that this child is so far behind, or this child hasn't been exposed. And I say sometimes that, I really feel like a lot of our children were not reading, not because of lack of ability, but because of a lack of access and opportunities. And access is also access to teachers who understood how to teach them how to read. Now, again, this is not a blame for teachers. Guess what? You can't teach what you don't know. You don't know it for a variety of reasons. And so that was, I think, first and foremost, our task is to ensure that we did our due diligence with teaching teachers how to best teach children how to read.
Yep. I think the point about standard English and speaking non-standard English, it's that conversation has always been framed in racial terms, but I would argue that it's not any different than learning any other language. It's just a form of communicating. You're doing the same things with the parts that you have, and it's a way that it works. It's just not the standard way of doing it. But the rules of managing the component parts to convey an idea are fundamentally the same, whether it's that or it's Spanish or it's Arabic or whatever. I mean, it's a way of communicating. But I also like your point about lack of access. Opportunity is a real thing. And people, if you don't have an opportunity, then you don't come to the table with the same starting point. Even that being said, that has no bearing on your ability to go forward when presented with different circumstances and given different resources, right? And so the idea of being able to say, I see you where you are, I know you've been able to do a couple things since you got here, and those things are going to help you get from where you are right now to the next place. And it's really about moving forward rather
Exactly.
than understanding what we're missing.
Exactly. And establishing a baseline. When teachers come in, I always say kiss a kindergarten teacher, because students come in from everywhere. They're coming from Head Start, they're coming from home, they're coming from early child care centers that may not have been of quality, may have been kind of babysitting services.
Sure.
They all enter into this kindergarten classroom on the first day of school. And that teacher has to take them from wherever they are and grow them throughout the school year. And making growth is even something that should be celebrated and should be monitored. But yeah, I think it's all about understanding where children are, not making those excuses, and growing those students and having those kinds of conversations. But teachers have to know how to do that.
Yeah, and not making excuses, I think, is very, very important, because let's talk a little bit about what it means if you're not literate. What opportunities were not provided, which led to a starting place that was different or not on par with where everyone else was. And now, if you don't learn to be literate and to manage the English language, what other opportunities in the future are we also denying access to?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, before, kind of in the beginning, talking about students who have just been passed along, right? Ultimately, or eventually, those students may be frustrated, may become very frustrated, and they may be high school dropouts, right? Then we start talking about how that impacts our economy, how that impacts a living wage, right, for that person. Oh, and then if they have a family, right, being able to support and take care of their families. So that's one thing, when it deals with the economy. But then you're also talking about quality of life, when, advocating for yourself when you go to the doctor, right? Understanding what it means around your health, understanding what it means for your rights, especially, with a lot of the climate around, policing and those things, how to defend yourself, understanding your right and being able to advocate for yourself. But of course, there are other things that remain generational. Sometimes in a lot of our communities here in Mississippi, especially in our poorest area in the Delta, a lot of our illiteracy was generational, and that some of our students had to tell their parents what certain things meant that were coming home, coming from home. So when we did begin to experience some success in those communities, that was the first time that they had seen, students, 100% of students passing the third grade test, or the news, the media coming to these communities, because they were throwing parades, like all of these things, because it brought a sense of pride to the community. And I say all the time, I think, especially from where we are now, we know we have a lot of work to do, but once you see this, you can't unsee it. So I think that we, especially with the Mississippi story, I think it's so powerful, because if it can happen here, it can really happen anywhere. No one has it, and we do know what to do about it. But yeah, I think that it just impacts, it goes beyond that. I think about, gosh, and I was just so guilty of it, telling parents, read with your child 20 minutes a day. Well, what if the parent can't read? Right? We're making a lot of assumptions here about, someone else's educational experience without really knowing their background. So it impacts it all. And I go to airports all the time, and I'm like, my gosh, if I couldn't, and I still
couldn't read. I know.
And I still can turn around. So I'm like, gosh, if I couldn't read,
right?
Imagine navigate the world, and especially navigate your life. There's so many implications for that.
There was, just on this point about reading, the parents reading with their kids 20 minutes a day. I had the good fortune of meeting an entrepreneur and an academic who have a project together. It's called the Cool Kids Club, but they've made an app where they've taken books, children's books, the early literacy books, and they've digitized them in a way. I mean, I'm not doing justice to the explanation, but kind of go with the larger construct here that I'm working with. Okay. So the idea is that the kid can read the book on the app, right? But it also reads aloud. So the ability of a parent to read with the child is then kind of restored, because the parent doesn't have to be able to do the reading. The book is there. Or if the parent needs help for certain things. I mean, the parent could read, but then if there was a part that they didn't know, that the technology could kind of step in. And I think I like the idea when I first heard it, but I think this what you're mentioning now about that not everybody can, we shouldn't make assumptions, but I'm really happy to see that there's technology moving in the space to allow that to change.
Yeah, and even for students, for our English learners who are coming to school and learning English, but they're Spanish speaking in their homes all day long. Right. And so asking those parents to even support students, just what you mentioned would be just really kind of an aspect to that.
Yeah. Okay, great. So we're almost running out of time. It's flown. I feel like we just got started, and I would love to have you back. I mean, it's been really eye-opening for me. I'm sure the audience is learning a lot from hearing your insights. I'm curious, what's next? What's next for literacy? We've got this early literacy. Everybody's got to read by third grade, but what else is out there?
I mean, Julia, I think you're getting the scoop here. What's next, honestly, is adolescent literacy. Is adolescent literacy because of all of the things that we've mentioned, with an intentional focus on empowering those teachers beyond third grade to be able to support students who may still, even with all the read by three laws, we know that there are students who may still be promoted to the next grade level who still have some deficits that need to be remedied. So supporting those teachers with professional development around not just our content area of biology, but think about all the vocabulary words that come with the sciences, right? Or even math, but teaching them how to be intentional about pre-teaching vocabulary and supporting literacy in their content areas, but then also adding those additional supports to the upper grades, as far as interventionists, as far as time, blocks of time for students to receive tutoring or additional supports. So there are a few states right now. Virginia was one of the first states to adopt an adolescent literacy policy, especially post-pandemic. It just went live this past school year, 24-25, for 4th through 8th grade was added to their K-3 law. And Alabama just adopted in their budget an actual beyond third grade policy to begin supports. And even Indiana has passed a law around issuing guidance to secondary schools so that they can support SEA. So they're just kind of in their infancy from their law, but they're starting by just really kind of taking a stand that adolescent literacy needs to be addressed. There are other states that are on tap next year, actually, to pass adolescent literacy laws, but I don't want to jinx it. So I'll just kind of keep that.
I understand. Yeah, I understand.
Adolescent literacy. I mean, there's a quote by, I think, former lady, I think Barbara Bush, former first lady, that says literacy is everybody's business. It's everybody's business. So it's not just reserved for your ELA teacher. It's not just reserved, that it's everybody's business. And
it's funny. It's funny you say that, because I was going to get to this because my next question has to do with, what's important for school boards to know, because FSC is, our sole mission is to make sure that school boards across the state are prepared. They have the access to the information, the tools, the training, the supports to be able to make the best decisions that support district operations. But I was talking to someone just the other day, and they said, well, you can't be all things to all people. Like, who are you trying to help? And I was like, my audience is Delaware. Every Delawarean needs to be concerned about. So I feel like this literacy is everybody's business. Like, school boards are everybody's business because they're affected one way or the other. Whether it's your property values, the quality of life in your community and in your state, economic mobility. I mean, there's just a ton of things. But anyway, so I like that. So thanks for sharing, because now I feel I'm going to say school boards are everybody's business.
That's right.
It's a lot simpler.
That's right.
But going back to the question, what do our boards need to know? I mean, what would be helpful for them to really understand when they're approaching their jobs with governance and fiscal management?
Well, the first thing that I want you to say to school boards is that your agenda reflects your priorities. That's first. So if you look at your agenda and all you have is approving contracts, right? There's no mention of data, right? How students are doing. No one's asking, how are the children? But also, if you're going to approve contracts for curriculum or for assessments or other things that are the business of school, there has to be opportunities for you to be informed and educated about those things. There are some states that send school board members to literacy professional learning. I was doing a session at Plain Talk. There was a school board member there from California. I was doing a session at the Reading League conference. There was a school board member there. There were also pediatricians that were in the audience, right? Literacy is everybody's business. And so I think that for school boards to really require that if they're going to vote on something, that there's an opportunity for them to be informed, better informed, and not necessarily in front of, at the school board meeting. There has to be, I know there's a school board now that's going to have a board retreat. And a part of the board retreat is that I'm going to talk about literacy and its importance. I'm on the agenda, right, to talk about the importance of literacy, because they want to do some things when the school year begins around literacy policy. So find the time, and not just all of the financial things, that's very important. Spend the money well and efficiently, but to educate yourselves on these very, very important issues. Many of them are coming from all different backgrounds. They may be lawyers, they may be, accountants, or they may be other business people or whatever. And they just may not be educators. And that's not a deficit. That's not a bad thing.
Right.
But bring with your experience in handling business, inform yourself on the business of school, so that you can make informed decisions.
Yep. Great advice. Great advice. This has been Dr. Burk. Thank you. Your insights are invaluable. Just to summarize quickly what I'm taking away. The audience has a lot to pull from here, but what comes through no matter what, and everything you've said, you're clearly an expert, but education was a calling for you, and I'm glad that you found it, because you've been able to make an incredible contribution. Noted that literacy is a foundational skill, and that we need to do better connecting elementary and secondary ed teachers, that we need to have some of the interventions at the elementary also show up at the middle and high school, and that this question of the pre-service and the in-service alignment, and that we have to support them, teachers when they first come in, but all the way through, and that coaching, really your example with the NFL, that was very, very valuable. It just sort of drives home that why would you not, sort of makes you want to ask. I'm with you 1,000% on that. Literacy should be a social justice issue. I do think that the inability of a public education system to provide an education that prepares an individual to engage with the world is a remnant of an oppressive system, and that there's no place for that today. And it does have implications, in school, what kind of job you can get, but really for your life and everything that you're trying to do and access. So 1,000% with you there. Hope the adolescent literacy stuff goes great. Wishing you a lot of luck with that. And I think I'm going to steal this line too. In addition to literacy is everybody's business, your agenda reflects your priorities.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us today. I really, really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Sure. And for everyone listening, if you want to dig deeper into some of these topics, please visit our Knowledge Hub. You'll find a wealth of information there. Thank you for joining another episode, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.